now. And we're letting someone in.
Heard that, Susie. So we'll give it a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
Hi, elementary school counselors. This is Sarah. Woo!
Hello, Sarah, high school counselor.
Hi, Sarah. We are just about ready to begin. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. All right, I think we'll go ahead and start on time. It's a couple minutes after 6, and we are recording. So if you prefer not to have your video on, you can turn your video off. And this is our second parent support night about managing emotions with the Toolbox curriculum. So I'll let Sarah and Marty introduce themselves and then we'll get started.
So I'm Sarah. I am the counselor at Jamaica Elementary and Havasu High.
Hi, and I'm Marty Miller, and I cover Smoke Tree Elementary and Nautilus Elementary.
And then I'm Susie Martin, the counselor at Oro Grande Classical Academy and at Starline Elementary. And we wanted to continue with these recordings and information for parents so they can see what the children are learning at our elementary schools with the Toolbox curriculum that was purchased by the school district for social emotional learning to meet the standards of Arizona and then the American School Counseling Association. So there are 12 tools in total, and those tools are listed on this poster. We have started to go into classrooms in different ways, and we are going through the tools in different ways. So depending on which school your child is attending, you will see maybe different papers coming home about what they've done, and they may be telling you about different tools. We're still covering the same tools. It's just that we may be doing them different weeks or in a different order. And we are hoping to instill the ones that we do with them this year so they can have those and then continue on the next school year. So tonight I'm starting with the empathy tool, and the empathy tool is maybe a little bit harder for some students to understand. We have some really good literature, books for children that help us to reach them. The real life tool for this is Level, So the little icon up in the corner there is kind of a cartoon level. And the idea is that we need to think about ourselves and others, and that we have feelings and so do other people. So the concept is that we notice if another person is feeling, how they're feeling, and being able to understand what they might be feeling. It doesn't mean that we've had the same experience as them. We're caring about them, and we might offer to help. And the books that I've been using in the classrooms emphasize, or you can use them to emphasize with children, the helping part. The idea that we think about someone else without them telling us, because we're looking at them and we're recognizing the feeling. And then the hand gesture is to put your hands in front of you and go up and down a little bit to show that you're balancing. And the idea is that it's imaginary level, and you just raise and lower, and then the word saying to go with it is, I care for myself, I care for others. I talk with the younger kids about how you can't just always be thinking of yourself, but you also can't just be thinking of others. And then with older students, a little bit older, higher in the elementary grades, we can discuss with students, if a friend is monopolizing their time, or they're spending all their time worried about a friend, to remind themselves that they also need to care for themselves. And this curriculum includes information about walking in someone else's shoes. So you can think of different scenarios to talk to students about. There are activities in our materials where we would actually bring other shoes in and have students stand in those shoes and think about how it feels. But with COVID, I didn't really do that this year, but that's something that you could do with your child. I know traditionally a lot of parenting and even teachers, we would say, well, how would you feel when someone does something to somebody else? And of course, that is empathy. But we want them also to just think about everyday life for that person. I had some examples I used with younger students, that if they see someone sitting at recess like this over in the corner, how does a person feel? So they're naming a feeling. And then how could you help that person? What would you do for that person? Or another example would be if a student accidentally runs into you. Usually when we do that, we feel bad too if we're the one that runs into somebody. So trying to help them understand, like, they didn't mean to do it on purpose, and also that they're having different feelings about it. They might be embarrassed, they might be hurt physically, things like that. Another thing about empathy that I didn't get much of a chance to empathize, I can't even talk, is that, like, think about students in class who raise their hand and then they get called on and then they can't answer, or they have trouble answering the question. And if you're someone around them, how could you encourage them instead of just putting your hand up and wanting to be called on? So those are just a few examples. And these are some questions that you can use for students, and I've already explained some of them, but we can ask students directly, what are some situations when you've seen someone act a certain way or act kindly towards somebody else? Why are they acting that way? How did that man know to open that door at the grocery store for the woman? Something like that. And then again, walking in someone else's shoes. And that's kind of the emphasized part in the curriculum. When you think about everyday life with your child or with students, we can always come up with ways to help them understand empathy. So reading and children's literature have a lot of chances for you to talk about empathy. And you can think about, the students can think about how a character feels and how the characters act. So one of the books that we have for the younger students is called The Lion and the Little Red Bird. And it's about colors, and it has one kind of thing going on in it, but it also has a chance for you to emphasize for a student empathy. And in the story, the at one point the bird is outside the lion's cave and there's a storm. And the way I talked with the students about it is the lion was safe and warm in his cave. He didn't have to care about the bird, but he thought about the bird without even seeing the bird. He knows the bird is out there. So how did he react? And they talk about how he brought the bird into the cave with him. And I tried to help them think a little farther than just when you see something, but thinking about somebody else. Even if a friend or a student is telling them something that happened at home the night before school, that they can empathize with that. And the other book I used was We Love You, Mr. Hatch, where a character shows empathy towards others and they show empathy towards him. And it also emphasizes helping someone and not really knowing how that help will benefit that person, not benefit the person, but make the person feel. So sometimes we don't know how we're making the person feel, and we don't know how important it is sometimes to just say hi to someone, include them when we're playing with them, something like that. If you have children at home and they have a conflict and you're trying to help them solve it in some way, and the other child is crying or the other child is yelling, you can encourage your child to finish the sentence. I think, Johnny feels frustrated, and then ask how they could help, how you could move forward from that conflict. And then drawing and writing are always a good way for children to express things. So you could have your child draw or write about someone they have empathy for. It could be a real person. It could be a character from a movie or a book or a game. Any of those would work. Recently, I think on social media, there's been a video of a little boy who's helping his little brother who's frustrated with a video game. And a lot of the kids talk about most of their big feelings are about video games, and the little boy is actually helping him breathe. And it's good that, he doesn't name it the breathing tool, but he's learned it from someone and he's helping his little brother, showing empathy towards him. And those are examples we can use for children. And then with a little bit older kids, like probably 4th, 5th, 6th, maybe 3rd too, is when children have certain behaviors, help students and children to understand why they might have those behaviors without going into big difficulties or details, but their difficulties may be attributing to the behaviors that they have. So if even people in the same family, if someone comes home from work or school and acts a certain way, try to help everyone talk about how they're feeling and what they need. And that can help instill empathy, because then maybe students will start looking for that. And I think personalities, some people are more naturally in tune to empathy than others. And when you work with your kids, there could be a time when a child is too in tune to others' feelings, and that's where the I care for myself comes in. So again, it looks like this: I care for myself, I care for others. And in this example, if they were thinking of a child and why they might be acting the way they are, and they become so distraught over trying to help the child, you have to help them understand sometimes they can help, but sometimes we can't fix others' situations or others. And so I think that idea of what's actually behind the scenes for the behaviors, that can be helpful when you're talking about the empathy tool. I found the kids really receptive to the empathy tool, and even though they don't know the word empathy, it's something they can learn, it's just a learned vocabulary word. But I was pretty impressed with a lot of their ideas and how they already recognize feelings in others. And I know that part of that can be attributed to our great teachers and educators at the different schools, because they do a good job of, when there are conflicts or things going on between students. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over for personal space tool.
All right. So let's talk about personal space. So this tool encompasses our intelligence, right, through the awareness of our body. So that could be body language, our voice tone, our posture, our gestures that we use, the volume of our voice. And so the tagline for this tool is, I have a right to my space and you have a right to yours. And we all have a right to our space. We all have a responsibility to give others the same right. And so this tool kind of helps bring more awareness of the space around us, right? It helps us see our own needs, how we impact other people, how much space we might need, how much space we might not need. So the hand gesture, if you outstretch your hands, I can't see myself, but if you put it like this, kind of like the kids, so when I did it in the classroom, the kids actually called it zombie arms. And so they use that in line already. And so I kind of just played off of that. And so we had them do this, and then it's basically just, I know you can't see around me, but you do like a half of your body. So it's kind of just like this. So it's like a personal bubble, basically. And so, you know, when we see students kind of forget, sometimes we forget, sometimes we're in line, we want to rush to lunch, or we're going to go back to the classroom, or it's time to go outside and play. And we forget that we're really close to somebody. We don't often become aware of it until that kid turns around and yells or pushes our body or things like that. And so this gesture will kind of just remind them a little bit, like boundaries that we need to respect. And then the icon is a ball of yarn. And so within this lesson, we use yarn in a role play lesson, and where we kind of talked about our boundaries, and we did role play, and they actually did it with myself, teachers, if they wanted to participate, and then other students. So the exercise that we did in the class, we did for most of the time that I was in there, and the kids seemed to really like it once they kind of got used to it. It's intimidating, you know, coming up to the front of the class and answering questions and trying to figure out the right words to say. So what we did was I put a yarn in a circle. I tried. And then I had one student come in the circle, whoever wanted to volunteer. They stood in the circle. That was their own bubble. That was their own space. I asked them, how do you feel to have your own space? How does it feel being, you know, not close to anybody? You're by yourself. And a lot of them, you know, were like, it feels good. And then it kind of turned to, oftentimes when we have our own space, we feel safe. And so then I would ask them, do you feel safe in this space that's all your own? And, you know, they would say yes. And then right after that, I would go step into their bubble. And immediately the class could see, you know, the students backing up. They would see their eyes get big. I would notice that too. And so then I would ask them, how do you feel now? And, you know, they're like, I'm scared, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm intimidated, things like that. And so at that point, I would ask the class, what did you notice about their body language? What did you notice about their gestures? And they would say, her eyes got really big. And so whatever the body language was saying, we talked about it. And I said, so what is that telling me? Because they're not talking to me, right? They're not telling me that I'm too close to them. But the body language is telling me what? And so they would say that you're too close, or, you know, maybe you can back up. And so then we would start kind of diving deep and how to ask for space. And so a lot of the students had really good, you know, you're too close, back up, which, you know, are great. That's one way to ask for more space. But one thing that I really wanted to make sure that we were doing, because one of our tools is a please and thank you tool. So I wanted to kind of hit off of that and then say, you know, we really want to use our manners. We want to use please and thank you when we're asking for something. And so then they would change it and say, please back up, or please move to the side. or you're a little bit you're making me uncomfortable. Can you please move away? And so I feel like that was a little bit easier for them to ask for. There's tons of different ways we can ask for space, right? Another thing too is if that person is not asking for, or is not recognizing, right, that they're kind of in your boundary and in your space, we have control over our own bodies. So these tools that we're learning they're within everybody, they're within each of us. And so we have control of our body. If nobody's listening, if we've asked them to move maybe, and they're not moving, we can take a step back and we can move to the side this way. So we don't always have to rely on the other person to move their body, because sometimes, kids think it's funny and they don't want to move, or if they're, have to be squished and they're going to lunch or whatever. They have that control where they can take a step back and then use their breathing tool, take a deep breath, and then continue walking. So at home, I'm sure a lot of parents out there, and I'm sure teachers too, they've heard, he's touching my stuff. Leave me alone. Get her out of my room. And so this tool will give your child a chance to use their vocabulary and talk about the space around them. So we want to talk about what it feels like when somebody's in our space, when it's not being respected. We want to talk about, the emotional discomfort that we feel. Some people are different. Not everybody is going to need the same amount of space. Some people are going to need more space from around other people. Some people are not going to need that much space. And we also talked about different types of people. So if we're at school and we're around our friends, we probably don't need that much space. I mean, with COVID, yes. But in general, we probably don't need that much space around our friends. We want to be close to them. We want to hang out. We want to, talk about things and show each other things. And so if we're let's say we're waiting in line at the grocery store, I think the amount of space is going to need to change. And so it's kind of, teaching and having the students become more aware of where we're at, maybe who we're with, is when we're going to need more or less space. And then at home, during times of conflict, if you got two kids fighting with each other, they're in everybody's room or they're on top of their bed at the same time, remind them of that personal space tool. Remind them of what they learned in class and how it felt to be that close to somebody when you didn't want to. And then of course, go through the examples when you're going to a restaurant and you're going out to dinner, and you're sitting next to somebody. How would you feel if somebody that you didn't know had to sit next to you? Or if you're going to a movie theater. So there's going to be different contexts, different areas, different people that you're with. That's going to determine how much or how little space you need. And then it's okay to ask for that space if you need to, or less space. And so, so our need is going to change. If we don't feel good, and I use that example a lot at school, because a lot of the times, whether it's allergies or if we're sick or whatever, we're at home or we're at school, a lot of the times we don't want anybody close to us. We don't want our friends in our face asking us what's wrong with us. That usually goes for the older kids, but it's just gonna, depend if we need that extra hug or if we do want to be left alone. And it's really important, I feel like, to know, how much space we want, and then to be able to ask for it if we need to. And then again, kindness is key. And every class that I went into, we talked about that as well. We're not going to stand there and be like, can you move? Can you get out of my way? Like, we don't want to ask like that, right? So we're going to say, can you please back up a little bit? Can you please move over there to that side of the table? And I think when we do use our manners too, most of the time we say please and thank you, it's reflected better. And so hopefully that will stick. But we really want them to communicate it and talk about it.
All right, and the third tool we're going to talk about tonight is called Using Our Words tool. And so you just heard Sarah talk about using some manners and some proper words to ask for what you want or need. And that's pretty key to this tool. And so I try to teach the kids that our words are really powerful. And we can all choose to use words that can be helpful or kind, or we can choose to use words that are hurtful. And so we want to try to help the kids learn to use the right words. So as you can see there, the tagline for this tool is, I use the right words in the right way at the right time for the right reason. Because a lot of times we do choose wrong words, and we have to maybe go back and fix as best we can something that we said by using the right words. So I let them know that our careful use of words, if we are using helpful ones, and it encourages understanding, it helps us connect with other people. And again, those kind and helpful words develop intimacy, which helps that empathy piece that Susie talked about too. That if we're careless or offensive in what we say with our words, that actually can harm relationships. And most of us don't want to try to harm our relationships or ruin friendships. So by learning the importance of words and how they impact the various relationships we have, the Using Our Words tool gives us voice to ask for what we need and what we want. But again, we want to do that in a respectful way. So you can see how many times the word right is used in this tagline. 4 times we talk about using the right words, the right time, the right way, for the right reason. That helps us create kind of that possibility of those deeper connections with others, but ourselves too. And Using Our Words tool helps us clarify misunderstandings and helps kids develop tools for conflict resolution. So we want to basically, this tool, we want to teach kids, they don't always have to come tattle to the adult and tell us every little thing that happened. If they start to feel empowered by using their right words in the right way at the right time, they can actually sometimes learn to be problem solvers all on their own with each other. And what a beautiful thing if we don't have all the kids constantly coming to the adults tattling, and it's like, well, wait a minute, you have words. What might you be able to say or do in this situation that might help solve this problem you have or this conflict you're in? So that's kind of the concept behind it. In order to have healthy relationships, again, we help the kids really understand that expressing our thoughts, our feelings. Susie talked about the empathy tool, so that's why it's really important we teach kids those feelings and how they're feeling and how others are feeling, because once we understand the feelings that we're all having, then we can use our words to try to invite others to do the same. So we can offer that that maybe help or encouragement to somebody who's feeling sad or having a bad day. And you've already heard in the previous video that we did, parent night, we introduced the breathing tool, the quiet safe place tool, and the listening tool. And the reason we really try to touch on those tools first is because once you're able to calm yourself and take a break, whether you physically go somewhere or in your mind imagine a safe place, we learn to really listen. Remember, that listening tool was we listen with our eyes, ears, and our heart, because that's how we connect with people. And that helps us then figure out, okay, especially when we're in a conflict and maybe we're agitated and we're frustrated, if we use some of those other tools, we take a minute, okay, what are the right words that I need to say or use here? So first, having the child learn to calm themselves, maybe self-reflect on what's going on, how's everybody feeling. Maybe you need to even ask somebody else to tell you what's going on. So you need to be that good listener. Then, what are the right words to use and the right response that I can try to use in this situation? So to communicate well with others helps us kind of get that deeper level of understanding. We all have like that little small voice in our heads that once we're calm and we can reflect, we all have that little voice that kind of helps tell us what to do. We kind of know there's a little, remember we all have that little old cartoon, the devil and the angel, I think it is, on the shoulders. Those little voices tell us all certain things, and we want to try to listen to that right inner true voice and try to pick the right thing to say to try to help the situation be better if we can. And the ability to communicate well, it is quite complex, because I can guess that even some of us adults are still practicing how to use the right words, and we have a conflict with our significant other or maybe one of our own children. We all have those situations that we do choose the wrong words, or maybe we have right words sometimes, but we don't choose the right way or time to have that conversation. The other person might not be ready to hear the right words that you have to offer. So it takes practice, and we know our kids need lots of opportunities. So it requires us to be aware of the different ways we do all communicate and interact. And again, you heard both Susie and Sarah talk about we communicate with our body language too, our gestures and our facial expressions. And so teaching the kids how the tone of voice and all those things that come with communication, it is quite complex, but over time, we all kind of pick up on all those little nuances, and we can all kind of interpret sometimes what's going on for other people, whether they do use their words or we just kind of read it in their face or their body. So trying to understand what's going on, and then using our words tool teaches children to use words to share their emotions as well, which we really encourage so we can understand what's going on for them. So they can say things like, I feel scared when you cheat off my paper. Will you please stop? That would be using the right words and letting somebody know how they feel and what they need. That's very appropriate. They can say something like, I feel really proud of myself when I do well on a math test. Using our words isn't always the negative. It can be positive things too that we want to be proud of, and we want to share something with somebody else. So using our words can be used in many, many contexts. Using our words in this way means that children can communicate their emotions and their needs without hopefully being hurtful or blaming. So we're really all big on teaching our children to speak respectfully. I always find it interesting when I ask kids, what does respect mean? What's the definition you have in your head of respect? It's a hard concept to like explain. A lot of kids kind of get it. And they know when they say wrong words. Oh, they know when they use disrespectful words. They can kind of call that out. But if we tell them to use the right words in the right way at the right time for the right reason, that can be respectfully using their words, saying how they feel, asking for what they need or want, and not hopefully have it kind of blow up in their face, right? So the using our words tool is super, I think, connected to that respect piece. And I don't think I've found a parent out there yet who doesn't want their child to, at school and at home, be respectful with their words. Okay. So the using our words tool, I think, can help parents at home too. Again, kind of those sibling rivalries, or sometimes kids even, use the wrong words with parents, right? They get angry, they yell, they're frustrated. Again, I already talked about, we get tired of the tattling. So, that he's in my room and he touched my stuff again. So again, using the words tool can help our children realize they don't always just have to complain about it. We want to teach them to help maybe solve the problem and do something about it themselves first. And sometimes it doesn't always go well, and then maybe they do need to get an adult involved, but we want them to at least try it. And sometimes they might be surprised that they actually can learn to be their own problem solver. And that is a beautiful thing, because that helps a child's confidence and it builds their self-esteem. And they will have to hopefully not come ask mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or somebody to intervene on their behalf. And I love this tool too, because I think it's a good balance between, we have passive communication styles, right? Those kids who probably won't even raise their hand and maybe rarely, if ever, like speak up in class or ask a question or even learn to advocate for themselves and say, could you please step back and not be in my personal space? Like, that's really hard for some of those kids who don't have the words to say what they need. So helping them find that voice is in them and that it's okay for them to use their voice in the right way. And then also we have those aggressive communication style kids at times where they yell and they use hurtful words or they're disrespectful when they're speaking. So those are really harmful tones and they damage relationships. So we try to get the kids who are maybe a little too aggressive and too much using those kind of wrong words or at the wrong time to tone down some of the words they're using and try to change those words to be more respectful. I have to tell you today, this literally did just happen today. And I had to like kind of just, like I was like super smiling and the kid probably thought I was like weird because I went and got a student I had been working with for a while and we were talking about using our words tool today and I was getting ready to introduce him to him and we just started talking and he goes, "Hey, can I tell you something?" And I said, "Well, of course." He goes, "I'm angry at you." And this was a little second grader. And his face told me this was no joke. And I said, you're angry at me?" I said, "Can you please tell me about it?" And he said, "Yeah, you remember when you came and got me last time?" And I said, "Yeah, it was the week before spring break." He goes, "Yeah. Do you know right after you came and got me, my whole class went out and did the Shamrock Run and I missed it. And you know, I probably would have won, but you came and got me." I said, "I did? Right before that?" I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "You know what? I'm going to use my apology tool right now because I had no idea your class was going to go do the Shamrock Run. I would, of course, not taking you out of that fun activity. So I apologize. I messed that up for you." But I said, I had this big old smile and I said, "But you just used your words tool. Like, that was so awesome." He said it very appropriately. He was like very true about how he felt and what I did that made him feel that way. And I was just like, I was just beaming. It was kind of a funny little dichotomy going on in my brain, but that was just like a great, and I just of course praised him, but that's just a true example of like how kids can use it. And it just went very smoothly. And then he forgave me and we were able to go on and get our lesson done for the day. But so that was just again, I want to just show you those like real life examples that we run into that are just natural, where we kind of emphasize how kids can use those tools or maybe already even are. So that was awesome. All right. And so always as adults, it's important to remember that we should always be the role models as best we can and go first, because our kids are watching us and they learn so much from just watching. So we can give examples and we can tell our kids, you know, "I'm feeling really frustrated right now. Can you please let me have a little personal space?" That's okay to do. That's very healthy. And we want our kids to learn that we have feelings too, we have needs. And so we need to also advocate for ourselves and ask what we need in the right way too. It's really important for kids to see us doing exactly what we want to see, hopefully, them doing. Sometimes our feelings and emotions are very important pieces that we are missing, that we sometimes hold back, that we don't really share like what's going on. And sometimes we need to teach kids to use those I statements instead of blaming. So examples like at recess, we get the two students, they're playing, one begins to tease and not let the other student take a turn. This happens, you know, quite often. And we get a lot of those wrong type words used and tattling and, "Hey, you know, stop hogging," and "You're such a jerk." That's very common to hear kind of on the recess field out during lunchtime. Instead, let's help those students find the right words and say something along the line of, I wish you were nicer to me, you know, please stop, or I really would like a turn, and it hurts my feelings when you ignore me or leave me out. Those are the types of statements we'd rather see the kids use. And it often, I think Sarah touched on it, often then that's received much better. You know, when you use the please or the could you do this please, like this is, you know, hurting my feelings, or I really want to turn to. Those are examples where kids might actually be surprised that they actually get what they ask for. And that's a powerful thing. All right, so we have just went over our 3 tools for this evening. And so now it's time for questions or comments about any of these tools that we've talked about. Open to whomever.
If there are any.
Susie, you're monitoring the chat?
Yeah, there's nothing in there. I'm looking at it.
Oh.
Oh. So there's one in the chat from Sarah. It says, should we go in order of the tools when talking with our children? For me, I think the first basic tools that we covered are really important to go first because they kind of lead into the other tools. That's my opinion on it. But I mean, things, you know, everyday life doesn't go in order. So, you know, whatever kind of comes up, I feel like that's what needs to be addressed and like should be addressed.
Yeah, I think I echo that the listening tool and the breathing tool and the quiet safe place tool are those tools that helps our kids kind of calm themselves if they can and go inward and self-reflect a little bit. But I think if a personal space issue comes up, I think that's a tool you could just, you know, go for it. And most kids, I think, can kind of grasp that concept to where they could start using it right away.
Mm-hmm. There's another question. Do you ever use the tools with older students in a group setting? That's a good question. I mean, it's kind of already a group-ish because we go into the classrooms and do this with K through 2, 3. Some of us are doing 3. I think it would be a good idea if we had more time. If we were at one site full time, that would be great.
I have one group of 4th and 5th graders, a small group that I work with, and the curriculum that we got has a separate little curriculum for doing a small group, and it incorporates the tools. So I'm using those with those 4th and 5th graders in a way that's not as straightforward as teaching each tool and handing it to them as, you know, their little paper tool, but it's more scenarios and goes a little bit deeper. And then I go into some 5th grade classrooms at one of my schools, and both classes have some behavioral issues and some problems getting along. And so the same with them, I am teaching them the tools, but not necessarily as concretely and I guess dictated in an order like we're doing, or like I'm doing more with the younger kids.
Yes, Sarah. So in the beginning, what I did is I actually handed out the flyer or just like how I think it was the second slide that we had in this presentation with all the tools on it. We can actually print that off from our website or the website. And I gave that to all the teachers and then a few parents, not all, but I post it in the newsletter as well for my schools. And I know Susie and Marty post the tools in their newsletter too. So I think it's going out. everywhere.
Yeah, and our newsletters are on our school websites under Counselors Corner. And that's where we've posted some different things related to the tools. So I believe, I don't know if both of us or all of us have done it, but I put up not just the list of tools, but their concept, gesture, and so on, so parents can access it there. But if anyone, not just parents, but if anyone wanted concrete paper copies, if they're not able to make those, they could just request that from us at the schools and we can get it to people to use if they'd like that. And then we also have access to printing off materials. So if someone wanted their little oval shapes of each tool, they could request that and we could certainly give them those too.
Yeah, putting it on the refrigerator is a really good idea.
Hey, I have to jump back in because I forgot to show my hand gesture for the using our words tool. Just dawned on me. So to back up just for a moment. So the kids, we teach them, we pretend like you are holding a pencil, an imaginary pencil in your hand. And then because our words are so personal and we have to own the words that come out of our mouth, we have them write their initials in the air to just personalize that they're their words, and they need to be careful of the words they use because they're theirs. And I kind of like the pencil symbol for this tool for another reason is some kids aren't very good at talking their words out loud. And so with the older kids, once they get the ability to kind of have some writing skills, they can always journal or kind of write their words out or practice maybe even writing out what maybe the right thing is to say. And so I encourage sometimes older students, if they don't know how to say something or say it right, to just practice writing it down or write in a journal and put all their thoughts down on what maybe they're feeling and thinking and what they need or want. Then they can always, it's a rough draft, right? They can always then kind of scroll through it and then decide if they're ready to either share it verbally or pass something on in writing that's still using their words tool and still communicating their needs in just a little bit different format. And it works at home too, with parents and sometimes those older kids that maybe spout off the mouth or that wrong phrase comes out and maybe a parent asks them to please go write down their thoughts instead and come back maybe later after they've done some breathing tool or some calming down mechanisms, and then they can talk about it later. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, and part of the materials we have, I haven't implemented them yet because we're just barely getting started, but we do have PDF files that we can copy so the kids can have a journal. For the younger kids, it's mainly they could draw pictures, and then older kids, it's a space to write, but there's also writing for the younger ones. And if we could get the kids writing, I feel blank when you blank, please, or what I need or want is, if we could get even some of the children to learn that and carry that into adulthood, it's only beneficial. And that's another thing. If parents really are super interested and want more things to work with their kids at home, they just need to contact us because we can provide those things. There's no rule that, you can't have this or that, and that only certain kids are learning the tools. We started with what we were asked to do K through second grade, but we do have other things. So any families that want those, we certainly can get those.
Yeah, and going back off of like the journal and drawing pages. So when I do my lessons, my last week of that lesson, whatever we're learning, that's my activity for that week. And what I actually did was I took the writing one and I covered the bottom half. So when I go into like kindergarten, instead of just drawing, I give them a prompt, like a sentence prompt, whatever we're learning about, I give them options, they choose one. They still have a section where they can write. And then at the bottom, they'll draw, a lot of, for personal space, for example, a lot of the students drew like a circle around their bodies that they drew. And that was initially their space bubble. That was their bubble. That was their personal space. And then at the top, they would say, I ask for personal space when I'm upset, things like that. And so I think that, I mean, it gets them writing, and then I save them and I actually post them up on the, the ones that are legible and the pictures are nice, but I post them right outside my office at both schools. And then like just little incentive type things, if I'm going to choose, a few from each class. If you have a really good one, it's fruit snacks, whatever, granola bars. But it's kind of that incentive. So then they're actually writing meaningful things, and then they're drawing the picture that kind of coincides with it.
All right. I don't think we have any more questions right now, unless anyone else wants to either put in the chat or speak up. Thank you, everyone that had joined us, and we appreciate that. And we plan to do some more parent nights to continue to talk about other tools as we go along here. So I just want to thank you again, and everyone have a good evening.
Thank you.